Welcome back. As air travels reopens in Nigeria and across the world, Phillips Consulting Limited has conducted a survey to find out how air travelers in Nigeria have been impacted and how air travel in Nigeria will be impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. The report also assessed the adequacy of the NCAA guidelines from the customer's perspective. Well, let's look at some of the findings of this survey with the head, Phillips Consulting Intelligence Unit, Mr. Victor Mba. Good morning, Mr. Mba. Thanks for joining us on the program. Phillips Consulting is in the business of human resource strategy and job hiring. So tell us, what's your business with aviation? What's the aim of this survey?
Thank you very much, and good morning for having me. Phillips Consulting is we actually conduct surveys for contemporary issues. And in 2015, we actually did a survey on the aviation industry to find out how airlines can revamp their strategies to actually be competitive. So at the wake of the reopening of the airport, we did a survey to find out 4 things. The first was how consumer behavior had been impacted by the pandemic. The next was to find out how suitable the land transportation is as an alternative to air travel. And we also found out how adequate are the NCAA guidelines that have been set up. And finally, we found out how organizations have been impacted by the lockdown of the airports.
So tell us what are
and
some
also,
of the...
we would... Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. So currently, we are actually having another report that is going to be out in a couple of weeks, looking at, as a follow-up to the 2015 report that will actually help companies in the airline industries to optimize their operations and actually find out what customers are saying about them and what they can do to remain afloat during this COVID-19 period.
Now, just before the release of that report, now tell us what are the key findings of this survey that you already conducted?
Okay, for this particular survey, we found out that customers will cut down their travel significantly by about 66%, limiting travels to just health and business-related issues. We also found out that a lot of customers will still stick to the airlines and not be comfortable going by road due to the unsafe nature of our roads and also the poor infrastructure on the roads. We also found out that a lot of customers are quite comfortable with the NCAA guidelines that have been set out. The most important guideline to them was actually the regular temperature checks. That is basically to keep the sick people away from the flights because they are the most vulnerable and also they are likely to be the ones carrying this virus. Finally, we found out that companies have actually benefited from this pandemic in the sense that most organizations have been able to adopt virtual working styles. We see that things like meetings, conferences, trainings, a lot of companies have gone virtual. And during this period, Phillips Consulting have also assisted a number of companies optimize their work from home processes and also have a lot of virtual trainings for these organizations.
Now, some airports have resumed domestic flight operations, albeit with not too many passengers. But what feedback are you getting from customers as regards to safety measure and implementation? I know you touched on it earlier, but could you just tell us more about that?
Well, the safety measures, personally, I was even at the airport yesterday, both the domestic, the international, and the private wing. And I can tell you that the safety measures are adequate and they are being followed, implemented very well. But like I mentioned earlier, we just have 11% of customers who are willing to travel now. So we would actually be able to do a better assessment when we are actually fully operational in terms of customers traveling and businesses up fully.
Now, how confident are passengers enough to get on board these aircrafts, considering the fact that they've been parked for about 3 months and some have struggled to keep up with maintenance due to the losses that they've incurred this period?
Yeah, beyond the fear of contracting the virus, a lot of customers are also skeptical about flying due to the fact that these airlines have been parked for a long time. And what we are seeing is that just 11% of customers will actually travel immediately. A number of them would never travel until a cure is found, about 28% of them, and some others would travel weeks after or operations have commenced, just to be sure that they are safe from this pandemic, and also that the airlines are in good condition to fly.
Well, many airlines are said to be contemplating increasing fares by as much as 50% to defray the cost of social distancing and reduce load factors. What soundbite did you get from customers concerning this during your survey?
Okay, the increase in fare is something that should be expected due to the forces of the market forces interplaying, but we didn't actually capture that information during our survey. However, the authorities can assist these airlines to be able to, cut down their costs for customers to be able to access this service without necessarily paying so much. So that is just what that is.
Well, let's talk about the federal government's role now. Of course, it's supporting the aviation industry with 27 billion naira as part of the Economic Sustainability Plan stimulus package. But when we compare this to what we have in other countries like in Senegal, in Kenya, in South Africa, and even Rwanda, it looks like that amount may be slightly inadequate. How much more should Nigeria be adding to this stimulus in view of the critical nature of aviation to the economy?
Yes, 27 billion naira, might not really be inadequate, depends on how that fund will be used actually. But for an industry that loses about 21 billion naira monthly, there is, the federal government can still do a lot to assist that industry. For instance, some other countries are having bailouts, direct cash bailouts to airlines. Some other countries are giving tax waivers and a lot of other incentives. So the government's 27 billion, well, it's a good start, but I think that figure can be improved upon to actually assist these companies looking at the losses they have had to incur during this pandemic period.
Now, your report says that not all airports in Nigeria will survive the scrutiny of the Federal Aviation Authority of Nigeria and the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority to reopen due to their aggressive intention to achieve global standards under COVID-19 guidelines and aviation protocols. Why is that? And tell us what could be their major challenges.
Well, beyond the infrastructure deficit in some of these airports that are just managing to, just have the flights at the basic level, we see some other behavioral issues that need to be taken care of before they can be certified by FAN or NCAA to be able to fly people. For instance, you look at touts, we still see touts at the airports. We still see people who are not really adhering to all the guidelines in terms of putting on their mask and social distancing. So as soon as these airports are able to comply, I think most of them will be certified by NCAA for use. Beyond compliance to the guidelines, another issue is commercial viability. Not all the routes currently are viable for flights. So it depends on how soon these airlines can be, the airports can be commercially viable and also comply fully to the guidelines as set out by the NCAA and FAN.
Now, the authorities are saying that under the new protocol, passengers for domestic flights should arrive 3 hours before departure and international passengers 5 hours before. Of course, many are complaining that for a 1 hour flight, for instance, the waiting time is too long. And, for an industry that needs to boost demand for its services after 4 months of downtime, is this long waiting time justified?
Well, for a flight of 1 hour, you have to wait for 3 hours. I think that flight waiting time is not justified. And also, remember from our survey, another finding from that survey is that 30% of customers actually say that they would arrive at the airport just in time to avoid long time of interaction with other customers. So that's 3 hours waiting time, I think, is something that the authorities have to, look at again to actually see how they can reduce that waiting time for customers to be comfortable coming to the airports and getting flights. The airlines also have a huge role to play in this area by ensuring that their online platforms are up and running and then they, as much as possible, try to encourage their customers to have their check-in and everything done online so that the customer waiting time will reduce. Another measure that can be put in place is to increase the number of staff at the counters, such that when customers come in to make physical bookings and to also check in physically and check in their luggage, it can be faster.
Right. Now, the airports in Abuja and Lagos, of course, opened for business on July the 8th this week. Now, when do you think that the other airports will come on board?
Well, as I earlier stated, the other airports would come on board as soon as they are certified by the NCAA and the fan has been safe. They will also come on board as soon as it is commercially viable for them to be reopened, because looking at the fact that customers will cut down their travel significantly, a lot of routes will be redundant for some time. Looking at the commercially viable routes Abuja, Lagos, maybe Kano, Rivers. Apart from these states, a number of states will not see regular customer flyers going there. So it depends on how soon these airports can be certified and how soon people can be confident to fly into these destinations.
Well, just before I let you go, tell us what's your view on the single African air transport market. Do you see that complementing the AFCFTA in boosting trade and accelerating economic growth?
Definitely. The single African air transport market is an enabler to the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Everywhere in the world, an efficient transport system is a prerequisite for economic development. And one of the aims of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is actually to boost economic activities in the African region. So if we have open skies and we are able to liberalize the aviation industry in Africa, it's a very good enabler to the growth of the African space in terms of the economic activities.
Head Phillips Consulting Intelligence Unit, Mr. Victor Mbath, thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.